Hello. Let's talk then about renewal, the secret of life. Well, I know this isn't exactly an original topic. I've talked a lot about it in various courses and lectures, but it has some philosophical considerations that we need to reiterate constantly so we can, let's say, internalize them in order to have them with us and understand them more deeply as well. Remember, I always mention this, that Confucius, when asked what books he would read if he had 50 more years to live, reportedly said he would read the I Ching 50 more times. In other words, sometimes we don't need so much novelty. We need to reiterate certain things that were told to us at some point in the past, but took a long time to be assimilated. I remember that phrase from Professor Jorge Angel Livraga, founder of New Acropolis, where he said that a human being doesn't live on what they eat, but on what they assimilate. So I would really like for some things to be assimilated by us. Therefore, let's talk then about renewal or the secret of life. We are at a very opportune moment to talk about this, aren't we? Because we have just passed the new year, which we already know is the international month for time planning, January. And we also just went through the start of a new season, which is summer in the southern hemisphere and winter in the northern hemisphere. We know that there are just a few days of difference, and they form a very interesting threshold. And this makes us reflective, because the closing of a cycle always makes us think, though I am not sure with what words. The voices that pass through our minds not only speak many languages, but also use a very diverse vocabulary. But generally, there are voices in our heads that challenge us. What are you doing with your life? And one of the things that is very interesting is for us to understand the concept of cycles and how nature communicates through them, so that we can harness the best energy from each cycle, extract the best that each moment offers. Moreover, we have just gone through the celebration of Christmas, whose name comes from birth. It's an opportunity, not just a historical fact of the birth of an exceptional being, but also a psychological event. It's an opportunity for rebirth, for renewal on different foundations, on other levels. Shall we see how we would do that? In fact, I bring to this little talk of ours some precious tips on how we can do that, how to take renewal seriously. Therefore, let's go. Well, we are going to talk a little about an imperative to keep living, how to leave things behind and to be reborn. And we know, for example, that spring, summer, autumn, and winter always return. A season has ended, but that doesn't mean it has died in our Western sense of death. Because for the Eastern perspective, to die is to renew, to go through another cycle. But in our Western sense, to die is the end, it's game over. That doesn't exist. We know that summer will return, as will winter, autumn, and spring. They won't be the same flowers, but the flowers will return. They won't be the same leaves, but the leaves will return. They won't be the same fruits. And each season will renew its role. Now, what remains? The spirit of spring. The essence of spring will continue to exist. And this is a very interesting thing that we will, actually, talk a little more about this later. If we pay attention and know how to ask the right questions, all the answers are in nature. I remember once, in a classroom, someone asked me why I believed, if I believed or not, in the existence of life after death. And I told him, look, it seems very likely to me. My grandmother's clock is an example of it. I think it's very likely, however, I can't be certain because I'm not the owner of the truth. But the greatest probability that suggests to me that this continuity exists is precisely the passing of the seasons. Because you realize that the essence of spring endures. Why not our essence too? What repeats each year is the spirit of autumn, winter, spring, and summer. Why wouldn't our spirit endure, even if surrounded by new flowers with new leaves? Renewal is leaving behind what has outlived its time. Not wanting to renew oneself in packaging, in superficialities, but to renew oneself internally, bringing to light something within you that has yet to be revealed. Bringing to light those seeds that have not yet sprouted, didn't produce flowers, didn't bear fruit, bringing forth your latent potentials and not clinging to the forms of the past. That is not renewal. And this type of imprisonment we know will always be a cause of suffering. It's the teenager who no longer wants to be a child. It's the young person who no longer wants to be a teenager. Then, later on, it all comes back again. It's the elderly person who wants to be a teenager, who wants to be a child. In other words, we are at war with life. We never want what it offers us now. This is attachment to forms. Renewal is not attachment to forms. To renew is to get closer and closer to the content, to the essence. As if each new cycle gave you the opportunity to shed a layer, a mask, and to see a little more closely who you are. I recommend, and I don't think it's a surprise to you, that I love Khalil Gibran. Khalil Gibran has a text that I find marvelous called The Madman, where, to sum it up, the 7 masks he wore throughout 7 lives were stolen. And at a certain moment, he ran through the streets shouting, "My masks? Who stole my masks?" And some kids who thought he was crazy from the rooftops started shouting, "Crazy, crazy. Look at the madman." He looks up to see the faces of these children. And as he looks up, the sunlight kisses his face for the first time without masks. And for the first time, his face falls in love with the sunlight. And he shouts with all his might, "Blessed, blessed thieves who stole my masks." I find this very beautiful, and it's almost like a goal. One day the sunlight will kiss our face directly, without masks. And this face, without masks, illuminated by the sunlight, is grateful for the passing of the cycles. To be grateful for those things that hurt so much when we let them go, but that now have given us something much greater. That is renewal. Philosophy considers that life is full of messages. One of them is the one I just mentioned to you. Just look at nature and realize that nature has no end in its cycles. It has an alternation, an eternal return. Why wouldn't life and death be like that too? Because in the midst of our difficulties, wouldn't we continue walking stronger, preserving the essence of everything we've experienced, but shedding the outer layers? So the mere understanding of cycles, not just the cycle of the seasons, but also the cycle of morning, afternoon, evening, night, and a new morning, the eternal cycles, both small and large in nature, understanding them would already help us in 2 ways. First, to better navigate through difficulties. Secondly, to fear death less. Thirdly, to love renewal, and trust that it will bring something even more beautiful. The next season will come even more beautiful. So, learn from nature. I always remember, as I've mentioned to you before, a story in one of those lectures I've given about the philosopher Diogenes, the one with the barrel. At a certain moment, they asked him why he didn't read, since he loved wisdom so much and there were so many wonderful books. And he said, "Look, books are for those who are ignorant, not in a derogatory sense, but for those who are unaware and want to know. For the wise books are not necessary, the wise read in nature." So realize that nature is an open book for those who have the right question, first and foremost. Secondly, know how to decode life's answers. Slowly learn life's answers. Between us, why do you think I spent about 30 lectures sharing myths with you about this, that, and the other, Egypt, Greece, the myth of King Arthur, the myth of so many things? I was trying to teach you a language, the symbolic language, which is the language of life. The events in your life are not merely random occurrences. In fact, they are not random at all. They are symbols. There is a language that life uses to communicate with you. And if you ask questions, it will surely answer you. Ask yourself appropriate questions, not superficial, personal, or trivial ones, but meaningful questions about the purpose of being here, the meaning of suffering, the essence of life, death, pain, your identity, and what is expected of you. Ask your question and learn to read the infinite answers that life offers you. This is literacy. The language of symbols is the same language as nature. Man learned to create his myths, his symbols, by appreciating nature, just as Diogenes did, as so many others have done. So learn to read the infinite answers that surround you, as Helena Blavatsky would say. How can we learn something from these cycles? One interesting thing, okay, it's not good for us to keep complaining about what has passed, and that's not my intention. But my intention is for you to take a look and learn a little. How could it have been if you had the right perspective? So if you imagine today, mid-January 2019 and a year from now, mid-January 2020, as well as a year ago, mid-January 2018, what was I dreaming of at that moment? What was I intending? What did I need to renew? If I look now, how many of those goals were achieved? Certainly not all of them. A very successful man managed to overcome some, managed to achieve some. The most disconnected person didn't even set goals, so there's nothing to evaluate. But if you notice from that ungrateful set of goals we didn't achieve, you could play a game of looking for, in those 365 days, the opportunities life gave you to overcome exactly that. It's an interesting exercise. Imagine I wanted to have overcome such emotional turmoil. At what moment did the year give me the chance to do that? I didn't take advantage of that opportunity. You'll find that moment. If you have a good memory and are a keen observer, you'll be able to tie all the threads together. At what moment did life give you the raw material? Life brought you answers and you didn't listen, you didn't know how to work with it, you didn't know how to take that information, that raw material, and build something better, something renewed within yourself. It's very interesting because if we don't do this, we remain stuck in our eternal habit of victimization. I didn't have the opportunity. Opportunities we certainly have. If we stand before life at this moment, the challenge you 2019. I stand before life and say, life, this year I want this. I want more emotional control. I want less pride. I want more altruism. I want more ability to make the goals of nature come to fruition through me. I want to be a more effective person. All right, that's quite an ambitious set of goals. So, you put this out to nature. You can be sure that it will bring you tools. It will propose ways to you. Now you have to be a keen observer and speak its language. Learn to be attentive. The other day I posted a phrase on my Facebook that I found interesting. Living a long life isn't about living 100 years. Living a long life is living every minute. And that's a reality. Live every minute, observing when life is sending you answers. Because if you put this proposal seriously, you can be sure that it will respond seriously. Life doesn't leave any question unanswered, and we ask with our whole being and with sincerity. So, connecting these dots in relation to last year gives you a certainty. This year, if I stay attentive, the answers will come, and they won't pass me by unnoticed again. I'll be waiting for them, and therefore, I'll be attentive. When we do speed reading, I don't know if you're familiar with this technique, but it's quite interesting. I practice it a lot because I have to read a lot. Of course, the speed varies greatly depending on the nature of the book, but I practice it. I'm looking for a quote from a certain author. I go with a question, and with a gaze like an eagle, searching for prey and moving through the land. Anything that appears, which has something to do with the content I'm seeking, catches my attention. I am attentive. Attentive, searching for answers. More or less, this speed reading technique applies to life. You know what the question was, stay attentive in searching for the answers. It was a very interesting stance in the face of the new cycle that begins. Continuing. The most important thing is to know which goals are truly necessary. This is another topic that could be a whole other lecture, but look. Think carefully, set goals that are real and necessary, the next step. Don't go practicing what Jung called ego inflation. I have a terrible problem with impatience and I get along with people reasonably well. So, instead of setting impatience as a goal, I set coexistence. Well, coexistence is a step, but maybe the third or fourth one. What you need to tackle now is impatience. Don't lie to yourself. If you want to grow, don't lie to yourself. Set immediate goals that prevent you from moving up to the next step. If you have doubts, consult someone you trust immensely, who loves you, a good friend, in the true sense of friendship. They will tell you, well, this is really what you need right now. These were the obstacles you stumbled upon in the last cycle. Friends of this kind are a treasure. Don't forget to nurture them. Well, considering this initial stance towards life, we have to consider another interesting thing. We dream of the flowers and the fruits, but we don't take care of the seeds. So, I've told you many times before, but I have to repeat it again. There is a wonderful book called The Light of Asia, which tells the life of none other than Siddhartha Gautama. Of course, they draw material from various other sources. Edwin Arnold, the writer, spoke with the Jatakas, with Lalita Vistara, with the Gospel of Javagosha, a bunch of things, and he synthesized a rich story of Buddha's life. There comes a certain moment when he tells the story of Siddhartha Gautama, recalling his previous incarnations alongside his wife, Yesodhara. And he remembers that at a certain point they were a couple and he was a pearl diver, very, very poor. And that region was suffering from a great famine, and there was nothing to eat. And he steps away a bit and tells his wife that he would only return after finding in the ocean the most beautiful pearl, worthy of a king's crown. He goes and actually finds that pearl. When he returns, however, that region had suffered a terrible famine, and he finds Yesodhara on the brink of death, starving. He runs around like a madman, offering that enormous pearl to anyone who could trade it for a plate of food. And he succeeds and saves Yesodhara's life. And in that life, as Siddhartha Gautama, he had made a great sacrifice to find an even greater pearl, which was wisdom. And at the opportune moment, he returns to his land and gives it to Yesodhara to save her from hunger. Not physical, but spiritual. And he says, look, experience after experience, I have been searching for the greatest of pearls, which is wisdom, to rescue Yesodhara from the greatest of hungers, which is ignorance. If I hadn't sought this from the beginning, I wouldn't be reaping the rewards now. Because the fruits of the present find their seeds and roots in the past. And the fruits of the future find their seeds and roots in the now. See if you have the necessary roots for what you intend to flourish in the future. If you don't have them, provide those seeds. Chase after the seeds, the values, the virtues, the wisdom you intend to acquire. Pursue the qualities of the human being you aspire to become. And every great life plan has as its ultimate goal to make us more human. To make us align more with nature's dreams for a human being. So consider this. Where are your seeds? If you don't have them, go after them. Nothing will come from nothing. You need the seeds. And today, what you somehow planted in the past bears fruit. There is no magic in the way we imagine. Magic is great science. Rabbits only come out of hats when you first put them in the hats. So now seek the seeds of what you want to flourish in your future. In the short, medium, and long term. Another interesting thing for us to observe. Spring has a secret. Your flowers will bear fruits that will be the nourishment for the next season. Each season has its secret. The great meaning of spring is to teach all beings how to be reborn. The small meaning of spring, at this moment, is to ensure there are fruits in the next season. This is a reflection on nature, but it helps us establish a fundamental point for managing our lives. The small goal must be embedded within the larger goal. The grand goal of our life is to become more human. The small goal for this year is to address certain elements that hinder our journey. In my time management course, I call this concentric circles. It's very interesting to reflect on this. Have our dreams of renewal borne fruit? If you ever had them. Be honest, at the start of any cycle in the past, did you dream of becoming a better human being? Be careful, because if this hasn't borne any fruit, You might be fooling yourself. Do you know what this is? It's a dream just for show, when in reality your desires, your ambitions are quite trivial. If you truly had that dream, the necessary test would have already come to help you shed the first layer. And you would have somehow either suffered or gone through some kind of butterfly cocoon process. You would have already gone through some cycle that led you to a level of renewal. So it's very important. Another tip, pay attention. The purpose of this talk is to give tips. You need to see the honesty in your intentions. If you only have a superficial desire for renewal, just for show, and deep down you want to remain the same, just better equipped to survive with comfort and pleasure, no seeds will sprout, no apple fruits will grow where you planted lemons. I don't want to belittle the lemons, but the fruits will be consistent with what you plant, as the biblical phrase goes. The sowing is free, but the harvest is mandatory. So be honest. Behind your proposals, is that truly what you want? Or is that what I jokingly call a mental slush fund? I have what looks good on the surface, but deep down what I want is more comfort, more fun, more entertainment, a more comfortable life, and nothing more. You're sabotaging yourself. You're living the Penelope syndrome. During the day, you go about your business, and at night, you pull the thread of your own rug. Another element, this isn't feeling too heavy for you all, right? I hope not. That's perfectly plausible. And it becomes more effective as you do it. Preferably several times throughout the year. Don't wait for January 2020. Reflect on this several times in the midst of this cycle. Create small steps, small circles within the larger circles. The difference between a dream and a fantasy. That's another thing. Are we proposing a dream or a fantasy for the year that's beginning? Do you know what the difference between the two is? A dream is a project that then makes you get up from your chair, seek out raw materials, and start building. A dream is, in the realm of ideas, the sketch of what will be in the concrete realm in 5, 10 minutes, or some set of minutes, but it will happen. A fantasy takes place in the mental realm. So there's that old story of someone who dreams of playing an instrument. But that takes a lot of work with any musical instrument, folks. For those who play, they know that the beginning is torture. So you start playing the piano, spending a huge amount of time hitting those keys, developing calluses on your fingers, and not playing anything. Until after a lot of practice, you start to grasp the first melodies, and after many years you might become a great concert pianist. Now, fantasizing that you're going to be a great pianist is easy. I close my eyes now and imagine there's a packed theater waiting for me, and in there playing Chopin's Heroic with the greatest ease. People give me a standing ovation. A fantasy fulfills itself. And it gives you a false illusion of accomplishment. Be careful, because dispersion, the tendency towards fantasy, is an addiction in our society, perhaps one of the most practiced. I'm trying to make a little chart of the most practiced sports in today's society on a psychological level. One of them I already know is victimization. I know that fantasy is the second one. I'm open to suggestions. Fantasy is terrible. I often joke in my lecture about violence that when a person gets on the bus, puts their hand in someone's pocket, takes the wallet, puts their hand in another pocket, takes the cell phone, puts their hand in the front pocket, takes the comb. And this person doesn't notice anything. Where were they? She was probably the hero of the primetime soap opera at that moment. She was there, the great heartthrob. In other words, fantasy becomes an escape that you can no longer control. And you no longer keep your feet on the ground. Every man who left a mark on history, who benefited humanity around him, who thought beyond just himself, had dreams, not fantasies. Be careful, establish a very clear difference between whether what you're proposing for your future is a dream or a fantasy. A dream has a time for planning and a time for practice. He knows how to renew himself from his mistakes, and he perseveres. If there is no road, he creates one. Remember that classic phrase that says, "Where there's a will, there's a way." A dream is put into action by willpower. They aspire to set foot on the ground. If they don't set foot, you're living a fantasy. Dreams are born in the solitude of our boldest imaginations. It's another thing that is a tool. I told you, these are tips I'm going to share. How much time do you have in your day to think about what you want to be? In the future you want to build? How are you managing your life so far? If your recent behavior aligns with the place you want to reach. If I want to reach the door and today I didn't walk towards it, yesterday I didn't walk towards it, last week I didn't walk towards it, it might be that so much time passes that I forget my life's goal. Or have walked so far in the opposite direction that it's no longer worth it. What ensures my dream is returning to it every day and saying, I moved 1 step closer, 2 steps, 3 steps, meaning I am progressing without anxiety, but with a constant sense of direction, so you don't get lost along the way, don't become a ship adrift. So, the important element is what Plato called divine bones. And contrary to what you might be thinking, it's not about doing nothing. In Latin, bone meant odium, which was the opposite of negotium. Negotium, the matters of the body. Odium, the matters of the soul. Take some time to focus on yourself, your life, and where you want to go with all of this. The reason behind your actions, whether they were thoughtless or thoughtful. And why do you still allow so many thoughtless things, despite the harm they bring you? In other words, reflect, stand before your soul and invite it for a chat. And exchange ideas about your time, your life, and your dreams. This is fundamental. So it is in this secret laboratory, in the solitude of our boldest imaginations, that we manage our dreams. That we manage our future. And we can make the most of the cycles we are part of. Because each of them has an energy, understand that. So the energy of summer is an energy of the fullness of physical life. If I have to accomplish something, the time is now. Then you'll see the energy of winter is an energy of retreat, of metaphysical life. If I need to reflect, if I need to read a profound book, if I need to establish some ideas so that I can later shape them in my life, the time is now. So I don't go against the cycles, I go along with nature, I walk hand in hand with it. I use the energy of each moment to align them with my goal. The man who knows where he wants to go adjusts his sails so that any wind is favorable to him. Do you know this old saying? So it's important to understand the energy of the cycles. I talk a lot about this in a lecture on the origin of modern celebrations, understanding the unique energy of each cycle. The classic celebrations were created for this, to remind people of the energy of each cycle and to walk using, adjusting their sails so that it takes them where they want to go. But our dreams need to be born into the world. For this, they require planning and follow-up. In general, we only plan what we are going to have and do. And what do we want to be? This is another reflection we've already made, even a little while ago. Don't sit down at the start of a new cycle and say, I want to go to Europe, I want to have a new car. All right, do that. It's not bad, they're projects. I'm not here to say that projects are sinful, nor to promote any medieval mindset. They are good if they are aligned with a project that is connected to being. Those are the true goals. In other words, I want to be a more fraternal human being. Well, then yes, if I go to Europe, everything I see will be a learning experience so that I can become more fraternal. And if I have the opportunity to set an example for someone, I will. I don't go to Europe in vain. I go to Europe to learn and share what I have, to make people more fraternal. Nothing, folks, nothing isolated in itself is good or bad. Good or bad, I use what is made of things. Don't think, I have a plan to study medicine, that's very good. In itself, no. It depends on what you are going to do with it. Remember that Hitler, with his Nazism, used doctors to torture people in his concentration camps. In other words, medicine alone is like a lifebuoy in the open sea. It can serve any purpose. Align your projects with dreams of being. I want to be more fraternal. I want to think a little less about myself and commit more to humanity. Well, then yes, the projects you place within that alignment are wonderful. I've already told you about a recurring question I receive at various in-person lectures. Professor, don't you think the internet is ruining education, ruining communication, ruining everything? Look, I find it hard to believe that the internet is doing that. What is happening is the internet users doing. The internet user. Because if you had a grand goal that justified your entire life, you would go to the internet to gather data. Or to share what you've already discovered. Think, folks, what would Plato be like with the internet? I've often told you that I dream of Plato tweeting the Republic. I think that would be amazing. Whoever has a goal, whoever has a dream, whoever has a goal in the realm of being, anything is a tool and is useful. Things in themselves are neither good nor bad. Good or bad, what do you intend to do with them? So don't forget, plan for being. And not just having, going, returning, buying, or selling, which aren't bad in themselves. But they must be aligned with a greater goal, a human goal. The flights of our imagination require practical proof that they are possible. In other words, this is another very interesting thing, quite Platonic. Imagine that you can do something for humanity. One of these days, this isn't just for great men. No. This is something for anyone, for any human being. You read the story of Siddhartha Gautama, seeing that young boy in his adolescence dreaming of ending humanity's suffering, finding a path through which humanity could overcome pain. You say, that's crazy. How can a human being do that? And he did. Well, okay, we are not Siddhartha Gautama. Maybe we can't achieve such grand things, but look, we can reach some measure of greatness. I find myself, for example, thinking about a number of people. This is a little something I open up for you. The number of depressed people who reach out to me asking for help in some way. You have no idea of this number. I keep thinking, is there some knot within me that if I untie, I might find a way out, even if it's not definitive, but one that allows this person to take the right direction. Something within me, if I conquer it, I could have the answer. Even if it's not a big answer, but a small one that brings relief in this moment. And I dream of finding that answer. And I search for that knot that needs to be untied. Remember the Buddhist tradition, the Dhammapada, which says that more than 1,000 meaningless words, one word that brings comfort to the listener is worth more. Don't you dream of that word, and it can bring comfort to many people. This is a dream. Don't think this is just a fantasy. This is a dream. Look back and see how many things humanity has overcome because someone went ahead and committed and dreamed of things greater than mere comfortable and pleasurable survival. Dare, it's worth it. And Plato spoke about this, that the flights of our imagination, especially grand ones like this, require references. Epictetus, a historical author whom I greatly admire, says that the seeds of greatness in a person require references. They need models to grow and germinate. That's why Plato used to say, have a hero you admire. So, I mentioned to you a very distant hero who was Siddhartha Gautama, who set forth a grand life project. Could you have a hero closer to you? Some great historical figure, some very generous person I met, who indeed, through their effort, was able to push humanity a millimeter towards its fulfillment. Even if it's just a millimeter, the existence of this person would prove to me that it is possible. And I have several who are references for me. In other words, sponsored by the chimes of my grandmother's clock, I propose to you to do what Plato recommends. Have a hero you admire. Cultivate the image of that person. Don't idolize personalities, but the virtues that person had. So was so dedicated, so fraternal, that he managed to untangle the problem of a community, the problem of a family, bringing that group into harmony, allowing them to take a step forward. So was so good, so honest, that he managed to make this group of people see something they hadn't seen before. Seek them out. These people exist. And it's interesting because in times of moral decline, like the ones we live in, they are the first things we forget. We needed to remember them. Create a pantheon, like in certain traditions that honor ancestors. A pantheon of those, not just from our family, but all those who, in some way, pushed humanity a millimeter towards its fulfillment as human beings. So, have role models. Our imagination needs to look up and see someone who has flown, so that it believes it is possible. Take Plato's advice seriously. Another important element. If you really want to do something in this cycle, remember, you need rhythm. The human will, and there's an entire lecture about this, is driven by two things: decision on the mental plane and perseverance and consistency on the physical plane. On the mental plane, I want to be more fraternal. I want to be more balanced. I want to find a way out of this knot in the human psyche. Something, a step that is more, even if it's just a millimeter more. I want to. Don't let doubts creep in. And on the physical plane, without haste and without pause. Perseverance, consistency, rhythm, sustain life. The passage of the seasons is a rhythm. The beating of your heart is a rhythm. Your lungs, your intestines, your entire body, your cells, all follow rhythms. And that's how life is sustained. Don't think you will sustain your dreams any other way. Learn to acquire a vital rhythm. That can keep you moving forward, not just surviving, but living as a human being. Remember that line from that beautiful movie, Braveheart, which says, "All men die, but not all men truly live. Some just survive." If you want to live, learn the secrets of life. One of them is rhythm. Your dreams demand attention. I always use Einstein's phrase, "The same causes will produce the same effects." In other words, I want to achieve something, but I'm using the same methods as last year. It didn't work. It won't work again. Examine your tools. If they weren't effective there, it's likely they won't be here either. The way you did things has already borne the fruits it was meant to. Seek new ways. Walk the streets looking for ways to find a solution to your problem. Ways to find a landing platform for your dreams. A platform for them to take off and return to you. Search. Walk the streets searching. I often tell my students how I started giving my lectures, and even today, in a certain way, I still do this. I would keep that idea in my head and walk the streets looking for answers to that idea. And I would gather suggestions from all corners of the world, and it seemed that things, through a process of simultaneity, would come to me. In various ways, suggestions would come, in various ways, ideas would flow. It's Jungian synchronicity. So, don't repeat the same methods, because logically they will tend to lead you to the same ends. Innovate, go through life like a little bird taking flight from its nest, attentively seeking out opportunities like worms for its chick. Take flight through life seeking tools for your dreams. Focus, don't lose your focus. Well, our realized dreams require a refinement of our taste. For sure. For sure. The time has passed, and I think now is the moment when people are starting to awaken to the fact that their tastes have consequences. It's not possible for you to have noble ideals and vulgar tastes. These two things are incompatible and one fights against the other. Anything you cultivate as a habit, as a taste, that is vulgar, that is coarse, that drags your consciousness down, will be dead weight, an anchor that prevents you from taking flight. So, refine your taste. I always remember that great thinker of the last century, Sri Ram, who said that evolution is nothing more than the refinement of taste. So, be careful, because you don't just nourish yourself on the physical plane. You nourish yourself on the psychic plane, on the mental plane. Be careful not to consume spoiled food. Because you want to go far, you want to fly high. And you can't go if you're not well on these planes. Remember, just the other day I was thinking about this. How long do the images of a crude movie I watched unwittingly linger in my memory? How long do we remain contaminated by poor musical taste, poor taste in reading, poor taste in our conversations, poor taste in our behavior, in other words, the vulgarization of the human being. Seek not an ideal of snobbery, but an ideal of nobility. The two things are not synonymous. The noblest people I've ever met in my life weren't wealthy, they were noble. Learn to identify that nobility. And snobbery and wealth are two very different things. I'm not trying to say that every wealthy person is snobbish, that's a prejudice. But snobbery is based on the possession of things. Nobility is based on the possession of oneself. So, pay attention to that. Learn to fall in love with everything that is noble, beautiful, just, and good. Refinement of taste. Another element. Dreams require imagination, that's obvious, and determination. It's a bit of what I mentioned to you just a little while ago about the equation of will. An idea and perseverance and consistency. This bold idea, you have to picture yourself there. This is very important. There are a series of complexes nurtured socially that when you set a dream that's a bit more fraternal, a bit more daring, they'll tell you, no, you can't handle that, it won't work. You have to think that you've already achieved it. See yourself, create in your imagination this model, you're already there. The work is already done, you've achieved it. Don't imagine this as a source of pride or vanity, but imagine it as a source of self-confidence. You have to see your goal. It's impossible, for example, to seek wisdom if you can't imagine a wise person. It's impossible to see your life fulfilled as a more fraternal, just, and good person if you can't visualize yourself as a more fraternal, just, and better person. Now, be careful. If you don't do this visualization, don't think that this space will remain blank. All media, every so-called cultural system of our society, which sometimes is more counterculture than culture, will implant a model within your imagination. Before you know it, you're dreaming of being the hero of the primetime soap opera. Or, I don't know, a trendy artist. This space will not remain blank. If you don't consciously create a model for yourself, soon you'll be living the mediocre and superficial models that society proposes through trends. Nature doesn't allow vacuums. Take the reins of your imagination and dare to clearly visualize yourself in this moment. Clearly visualize yourself already being what you dream to be. And believe in this idea. Don't let any room for doubt creep in. And have the grit to face all obstacles. I often recall, in relation to this, the great traditions of the past, the great mythologies. Many times they spoke of paradises, like, for example, the Norse Valhalla. It is said that when the Norse went to war, they didn't look at the enemy's front line, they looked towards Valhalla on the horizon. They just had to remove those people from their path. Because Valhalla was there, they were seeing it all the time. In a certain way, if you don't lose sight of Valhalla, removing the obstacles from your path becomes much easier. I'm not suggesting that you go to war with anyone, but that you have the determination necessary to open doors, to create a crack amidst your difficulties. Without seeing Valhalla on the horizon, you won't succeed. This is an ancient secret that our ancestors, human beings, left for us as a legacy. Take hold of this as well. One fundamental thing, which we've talked about quite a bit before, but let's better shape it here. Our dreams, to be strong, must have a sense of mission that includes more people beyond just yourself. In other words, out of the countless actions I can take right now, which one will not only benefit me, but the greatest number of people possible? Curiously, the less we think about ourselves, the more our dreams benefit us. They free us from the chains of selfishness, which is the greatest evil in the world. Once again, as I've done in many talks, I challenge you. Look for a problem in the world that doesn't have selfishness lurking behind it. Every time your dream is broad enough to escape the clutches of selfishness, just the act of dreaming already elevates you. So, try to broaden your vision of your dreams. Seek to gradually banish selfishness from within them. Well, it's not selfish for me to want to have rest, to want a decent place to live, to want to have fun. No, it's not selfishness. But if the goals of your life are only that, it's selfishness. That's a good project, but it's not enough for a dream. There has to be something greater. This helps me regain my strength. For what? Why am I going to regain my strength through this journey, through this moment of comfort? What am I going to do with this strength? Seek more tips and more comforts. Then it starts to become like a dog chasing its own tail. These things, like projects, can be very good, but your dreams must be as fraternal as possible. And here we go. Always remember the idea of the sacred. On other occasions, I've shared with you that secret, that phrase from Mircea Eliade, where he says that the sacred is the function of giving meaning. When you look at your time, imagine if we could do that. Look at our year of 2018 and say, it was filled with meaning. Everything I did had a clear purpose, to grow as a human being and be a contributing factor to humanity. Some things may not have worked out, but I learned from those mistakes. But everything had a greater meaning. I wasn't wandering around aimlessly. I didn't waste my life. Everything I did was in search of a greater purpose. Well, that's a man who can sleep the sleep of the just. Because your time was all very well directed. Strive to make your life sacred. When, today, this moment. Does this moment have meaning? Are you listening to what I'm saying with the intention of building yourself into a better human being? Humanity really needs this. But I won't achieve more than a drop. A drop makes a big difference in a world so full of the thirsty. In other words, give meaning, a direction to every act of your life. And then you sanctify life. Remember what I used to say, that the Greeks believed the great art of man is to steal moments from time for eternity. Steal moments from the mundane to the sacred. In other words, imbue your time with meaning. And evaluate every day how much I managed to achieve from my day to day. How much I managed to sanctify. The whole is always more than the sum of its parts. Learning to integrate, to work towards unity, means increasingly finding your true form, as if the universe were a great puzzle. That form which, when adopted, allows you to fit into the whole, makes you a factor of benefit, makes you a historical factor of transformation. Find the form that nature expects of you. When you align yourself with the purpose of nature, you are one step closer to unity. One step closer to God, which is the great goal and the grand objective of the entire universe. The path of the One. What else would be a truly good memory for perhaps indeed achieving our dreams this year? We can talk, for example, about evaluating periodically and to have the courage to correct, to have the courage to start over. Since the theme of our talk is renewal, the title of our talk is renewal, perhaps this is the most important point of all. With all these concerns I've shared with you, it's possible to make mistakes. It's possible to take a completely ineffective path. It's possible to create a little chaos. But that's not so serious if you are attentive, aware, and willing to renew as many times as necessary. Perhaps it's a good lesson. When we make mistakes, when we lose our way, but our awareness brings us back. And we realize what led us to make that mistake, perhaps it's a greater lesson than getting it right. Sometimes in pain, we learn more than in joy. Joy sometimes only brings euphoria, while pain brings reflection. So, renewing oneself is not just a proposal for the year, it's a proposal for every day, for every month, for all the small cycles. Every time we become aware that this is not the right path, may we be able to start anew. That's what I wish for you in this next cycle. Happy new cycle to everyone.